Welcome back, everybody, to the very first retrograde of 2024 here on Dead Jester Cinema. And, I feel like it's never too late to celebrate Christmas here, so we're going to go back a month and review a movie that I actually live streamed literally just about a month ago, the 1974 cult classic, Black Christmas. Now, if you were some of the unfortunate ones that watched that live stream, it was a bit of a clusterfuck. It didn't go how I planned it to go, but I did say that I would come back here and actually sit and review the movie on a retrograde, so here we are. Now, this is a film that has kind of sat in my library for years. I had been kind of wanting to review it, but waiting for the right moment. And after I did that live stream, I thought about reviewing it then, but then I decided, well, maybe I'll wait. Maybe I'll wait until even next year, next December to review it, but I figured I'll just do it now. Let's get it over with. So, without further ado, let's jump into Black Christmas.
Let me lick it. Lick it. Let me lick your pretty piggy cunt.
If I ever find out who you are, I'm gonna shove a sausage down your throat and stick starving dogs in your butt.
Black Christmas is about a group of girls being terrorized by obscene phone calls from a mysterious assailant, who then sneaks into their sorority house and starts murdering them, all while the police are trying to figure out who the killer is and where the calls are coming from. First thing right off the bat, let me just say that I love the way this movie looks. The 70s really had its own style when it came to movies, and especially these low-budget horror movies. It just feels real, it's not overly stagey, like it feels lived in. Those real-world lived-in locations are always the best. Not to mention there's some great atmosphere, I love the Christmas setting, I love the use of Christmas music, it's all used so effectively, and it adds just an extra creepy factor. Plus there's just some amazingly good cinematography and direction. Plus, I love the use of the POV shots for the killer, and I think because you never actually see him and you're just seeing what he sees, it makes the movie extra scary. You can definitely see the inspiration John Carpenter had when it came to Halloween, plus even more so, I think you could see the inspiration Sean Cunningham had on Friday the 13th in terms of how he used those same shots for his killer. Plus, I also think this movie is really well paced. I mean, there are some genuinely funny moments, and those pair up perfectly with some genuinely tense moments. And those two things paired well off of each other give the movie a kind of nice roller coaster feel, so that way the entire tone doesn't feel flat and one note.
Ho, 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 fuck.
Also, one thing I give this movie a lot of credit for is having the balls to kind of tackle abortion the way that it did. Now, I know it's a taboo topic, even for the time in which this movie was made, but I feel like it was presented here in a very real and non-preachy way. They don't really beat you over the head with it. You see both sides of the issue and how it affects both parties. Look, I'm not here to get political about it. I really don't care what side of the aisle you're on, whether you're pro or con. I'm just pointing out that for a movie that is now, 50 years old, I think this year, we are still having these same discussions, and it is still a hot button topic, and it's still just as relevant today as it was then. Now, when I bring up that 70s style in terms of filmmaking, I also got to bring it up in terms of characters as well, because I feel like the characters in 70s films have their own sort of unique voice. They're very brash and crude, but they're also a lot of fun, and I guess that just is more or less speaking to that rebellious nature of the time. The whole cast is really good, highlighted by the alcoholic house mom, the uptight father, John Saxon, who is here just starting off his law enforcement career before moving to Ohio to battle Freddy Krueger, and of course Margot Kidder, who is great as the loudmouth and crass but very likable Barbara. Although I did have a tough time trying to figure out, was this her acting, or did she just do a whole bunch of cocaine and then they just turned on the camera and let her go? But I feel like the one thing that's kind of overdone with her character is that boorishness, because it's leaned into just a little bit too much in places that it feels forced for a cheap gag. Like this part of the movie where she's explaining animal sex to the uptight father of one of the victims. Now, is it played off as kind of like a defense and coping mechanism? Yeah, I think so, but There wasn't an overall point to it, other than she's just drunk, and then she goes off to bed. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that I hate that quality about her character, or I necessarily hate that scene, but was it necessary in those moments? I don't think so. But the main star of our movie is the character Jess, played by Olivia Hussey. And she's okay. Her performance is a little stiff and inaffectionate for my own personal taste, and because of that, I can't really get invested in her character. Plus, I think because the whole cast of characters is so colorful around her, her performance does come off as kind of flat. Plus, it might be a little nitpicky on my part, but the one thing that got on my nerves really quick was that she could not answer the phone without yelling.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Goddamn rich cunt! I kill rich cunts!
Now, the other lead in this movie, as it were, is Jess's boyfriend, Peter, and I gotta say, I really feel bad for this guy. I mean, right off the bat, we kind of get the sense that his and Jess's relationship are in two different places. Plus, in like the span of a day, he finds out his woman is pregnant but gonna have an abortion. His dreams of being a pianist go up in smoke. Not to mention, Jess rejects his marriage proposal. Plus, on top of all that, he's set up as the suspect number one to being the possible killer. And if this wasn't bad enough for this poor guy, Jess ends up killing him at the end when she confuses him for the killer. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't excuse the way he ultimately does act towards Jess in certain scenes of the movie in regards to marriage and the abortion, but damn, I feel for you, man.
Morning, fellas. I'm afraid you're just too darn loud. Next, please.
Now, movies like this are often only as good as the killer, which in this case is Billy. And there are some really good kills in this movie. I like the suffocation, and constantly showing that body up in the attic is really just skin crawl creepy. And I really like the unicorn stabbing of Margot Kidder. But overall, Billy as a killer, I think is really fucked up and creepy. I like the enigma that is left at the very end, never finding out who he is or why he's doing what he's doing. That absence of motive is terrifying. But I think what ultimately holds him back is, he doesn't have a look like Leatherface. He doesn't have the backstory like Myers or Voorhees. Or he doesn't have the charm of Norman Bates or Freddy Krueger. He's just kind of there. And because of that, I think that's what has allowed his possible status as a horror icon to sort of trickle through and fall through the cracks to just a really loved cult horror icon. Because he is really super creepy and he's really good, but there's just not much more to him. I mean, we get the hints of it through his phone calls, but I think if they possibly would have done a sequel, or if they could have elaborated on him a little bit more, it would have elevated him up in that mainstream pop culture status. But as it is, he's just sort of there to facilitate young girls getting killed. But now it's time for what is the biggest issue with this movie to me, and that is the ending. Now, once Jess finds out that the calls are coming from inside the house, the tension does ratchet up, even if her decision making to stay and not just immediately leave is questionable. Hold on, time out. Where have I heard that before?
The caller is in the house.
The calls are coming from the house.
You trace the call. It's coming from inside the house. A squad car is going over their way.
So you're telling me they blatantly ripped this off and used it for their movie? Ain't that some shit? But, I think we need to start putting some respect back on Black Christmas's name for getting to that concept first before When a Stranger Calls. Anyway, where was I at? Oh yeah. Well, once that tension starts ratcheting up, it does escalate, and she comes face to face, sort of, with the killer. Then it just ends. You know, I wanted more, and it just didn't feel like a satisfying enough ending for me. And then at the end, the cops just leave Jess alone in the house. Like, what the fuck? And brilliant police work, Keystone Cops, in sweeping the house. You know, you took care of the basement, but I guess you forgot about the attic? But let's rewind a little bit and go back to where I mentioned how Jess confused her boyfriend as the killer. Now, he didn't do himself any favors with his behavior, and here he's sneaking around and breaking into the house at the very end. I mean, how he knew Jess was in the basement of this big-ass house is anyone's guess. But Jess knows he's not the killer. It's brought up by the police earlier. When questioned if Peter was with her at any time that these calls came in, she emphatically says,
He was at the house tonight when the first call came. That's right, it couldn't be Peter.
But maybe with the added knowledge that the calls were coming from inside the house, you know, made her second guess her initial thought that he wasn't the killer. But ultimately, when push comes to shove and she has to kill her boyfriend, it doesn't seem to bother her too much. She seems pretty resolute. And I think with her character, that's where I wanted to see a little bit more of that emotion. I wanted to see that struggle in making that decision to kill the person that you thought you loved. Because as it is, this ending just feels really rushed and poorly thought out. Now, before I get to the final grade, I want to bring up what I thought was the high point and the low point of the movie for me. Now, the high point for me isn't necessarily one scene. I just think it's the overall look and the aesthetic and feel of this movie in general. I just love the cinematography and I just love the atmosphere. I think that stuff is just great. Unfortunately, the low point of this movie to me is that ending. Now, maybe I'm just used to modern horror or films like Halloween where I expected more of a chase, but I think something like that is missing here at the end of this movie. Plus, like I said, I wanted to see more of that emotional struggle with Jess in terms of the decision to kill or not kill her boyfriend. And yeah, the police at the end of this movie just completely suck. But overall, I give this movie an 88%, which is good enough for a B+. And off to the side here, you can see how the grading breakdown went. I gave the direction an A, I gave the story a B+, characters got a B, and the music itself, which I didn't address in my review, got a B. I thought it was all really good. I thought it was exceptional. Just a couple of things could have been a little bit better for my own personal taste to bump this into an A category. But overall, it's a really good movie, and it's a good proto-slasher. But I think the films that came after this one that were inspired by it perfect on its concept just a little bit more. Well, that wraps up Black Christmas on this very first edition of the Retrograde here in 2024. If you have seen the movie, what are your thoughts on it? I'm curious to hear what they are, because this was a movie I came into completely blind. I had never seen it before, and I walked away really, really liking it. I think it's going to be a Christmas tradition for me from here on out. But anyways, what would you guys grade Black Christmas? Please post them below, as well as your comments. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios. Now, GTFO!